Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to a response video from Neil over at Neil's Movie Channel. He made a video about musical films, or films about musical, or about music. If you were doing a marathon, what are the films that you would watch back to 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 back? And seeing Neil as a friend of this channel and a thoroughly nice bloke, because he recently picked up a couple of John Sayles films, so he's all right in my book. So I thought I would just do a response to his challenge. Now, as I'm in the middle of the moving process, I have actually put some of my collection into boxes. It was very difficult. It was quite emotional, but I have. So some of these titles I don't actually have to hand. Again, I'm not the biggest musical fan, but I do have quite a long list of films perhaps about the musical process, or about fictional bands, or the inspiration for music rather than standard musicals. Obviously there's lots of Disney films that I love, like The Jungle Book, which has obviously got some great songs in it, which I haven't included in this list. But ones that I don't have the copies to hand would be Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire by Alan Clark. You see Alan Clark, the political realist, and he's making a musical, but it's Alan Clark, so obviously it's about class. Billy the Kid being representing the working class, and the Green Bay's Vampire obviously modelled in multiple world champion Ray Reardon, representing the establishment. I mean, I hope someday it's on Blu-ray. It's just on DVD at the moment. I mean, I can't remember whether it was Channel 4 that partly funded it, and Channel 4 are sometimes a bit weird with Blu-ray releases. But hopefully one day the BFI or Indicator will get a Blu-ray of Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire, because it's absolutely wonderful. Starring Alan Armstrong, amongst others. Then the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, which sadly I have boxed up. It's the only film that Dr. Seuss was actually a part of, and he hated the process so much that he was never a part of any of his film adaptations since. It's a strange fever dream, I know that's a cliche, fever dream of a film, just so colourful and strange and odd, but it's absolutely wonderful. That's on Blu-ray by Indicator, and if you like your musicals a little bit odd, then I would highly recommend picking it up. Almost Famous I have on 4K, but I have packed that one away. It's just wonderful, and it's wonderful because it's really about from a music fan's perspective. There's a great scene with Philip Seymour Hoffman, as you know, the fans, the ugly ones, you know, we have the music. You know, Leonard Cohen has a wonderful line about, you know, we're ugly but we have the music, and that's where it's really fantastic. An amazing cast, a great soundtrack as well. Almost Famous is one of the best films of the 2000s. Bugsy Malone, people of a certain age grew up on Alan Parker's Bugsy Malone. Obviously we could have been anything that we wanted to be, still bring a tear to a glass eye, especially as you get older and you realise all the missed opportunities and regrets you have. and for me, arguably the greatest biopic of all time that hopefully someday will get a Blu-ray release. It's just in DVD and it's quite hard to get, and that's Francois Girard's 32 short films about Glenn Gould, the famous pianist who has recordings of Bach, piano concertos that were actually sent into space. Not because they were bad, but if alien life was to stumble across them, they'd go, that guy plays good piano. Again, the title gives it away, but instead of doing that rather boring thing with biopics of just chronologically going through their life, this is literally 32 short films about Glenn Gould, strangely enough. And it's absolutely wonderful. So we'll get on to the ones I actually have in physical media, well, available physical media, because obviously I have those films in physical media. That'd be outrageous if I didn't. Starting to me with the daddy of musical films. I don't know whether you need to be a certain age or have a certain taste in music to love it completely. But Spinal Tap, when you think of films about music and bands, Spinal Tap is the daddy. You know, every now and again when I'm feeling depressed, I'll watch these young reactors on YouTube watching films and reacting to them, and most of them just don't get about 90% of the references in Spinal Tap, or 90% of the jokes just go over their head because it's the subtle stuff. You know, obviously the bonus of about an hour and 10 minutes of bonus material, hopefully one day there'll be a super cut of Spinal Tap because the bonus material is almost as good as the stuff that's in the film. Obviously there's a sequel coming out which I have very low expectations for, but Spinal Tap is just a Stonehenge size monument to the greatness of mockumentary. Obviously it's been ripped off with so many people, but it still remains the ultimate. Next, again, a film that for a long time was my favourite musical of all time, and certainly not one to watch with the parents, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, with a seminal performance by Tim Curry. But I do actually think there's a film that's overtaken that, and that's Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise, which is, again, this gives you a kind of almost history of music through the various styles of song, from rock and roll to almost heavy metal, and the birth of heavy metal and everything in between. It's got a great score and great songs by Paul Williams, who wrote the Bugsy Malone score. It's just so good. It's part Faust, part Phantom of the Opera, and it's wholly wonderful. And then we get to Powell and Pressburger, and obviously the Red Shoes, or the Upside Down Red Shoes, which is obviously about ballet, but it's also about the creative process. And obviously you have Tales of Hoffmann, which is flawed but absolutely spectacular. And when I did go to cinema in the past, I did actually see Tales of Hoffmann in a restored print, and it was almost a religious experience. And then the third, which Network released, O Rosalinda, which is certainly the weakest of the three, but still has moments of pure genius, and it is fantastic to have it on Blu-ray. That's kind of based on Die Fledermaus. And then this is an absolute gem from Japan that Hus from A Touch of Film recommended, and it's Swing Girls. This is sensational. Again, you could be cynical and say, well, it's brassed off but with Japanese schoolgirls, but it's so much more than that. Yes, we've seen it lots of times before, but man, it's absolutely wonderful. I would highly recommend it. a group of kind of unruly Japanese schoolgirls accidentally poison the members of the school band. I'm not going to go into how they accidentally poison the members of the school band. And they come together through bickering and obviously lots of drama, come good at the end, and enter the competition. It's just so fantastic. It's a perfect example of a film that has the framework, has the story that we've seen countless times, but it's just done so well that it doesn't matter. It's just fantastic. Then if you want to get a little bit more baroque, it's The Silence Before Bach by Per Portabella on Second Run, which is a strange kind of sort of biopic, sort of not a biopic of Bach, which shouldn't work but kind of does. So if you want to go art house, The Silence Before Bach is certainly worth checking out. Not a musical per se, but it has, or Percy, whoever Percy is, but it's the Legend of 1900, Giuseppe Tornatore's true masterpiece. Don't believe what people tell you about Cinema Paradiso. This is his true masterpiece, and it features one of the greatest Ennio Morricone scores, probably arguably his most underrated score. This features lots of piano. Tim Roth is the little boy who grew up on an ocean liner. Again, it's just so good. You either love it or hate it. Yeah, not a musical, but there's tons of music in it. And the piano duel between Tim Roth and Jelly Roll Morton, played by Clarence Williams, is just tremendous. Then a really silly one, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, which is from the kind of Judd Apatow school of comedy. It's got a brilliant John C. Reilly performance though, and again, very much like Phantom of the Paradise, it almost gives you a history of music from rock and roll to the Elvis times, to a bit of Dylan and Bowie, and it does have some classic scenes. Yes, it's daft, and it also has a moving cameo by Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder. And then Frank with Michael Fassbender, even though he's wearing that head the whole film. This is just absolutely blew me away. Lenny Abrahamson's film from 2014, and this is more about the music making process as far as recording, and it's about a guy who has no talent whatsoever but wants to become a star, and he hooks onto this strange band headed by Frank, literally headed, and Maggie Gyllenhaal. It's got a fantastic score. Again, it's an absolute masterpiece for me, but again, I can see if people don't like it. The songs are great, if odd, but if you're into kind of Captain Beefheart and Zappa, it's just wonderful. And it's also one of the great films about mental health as well, and mental illness. It's just fantastic, and it's got this lovely lenticular from Plain Archive. And then finally, a film that Neil mentioned when he was going through his selection, David Byrne's True Stories. I think, being a Talking Heads fan, I think I actually had the album before, or the soundtrack album before I actually saw the film. When I saw the film, I absolutely loved it. David Byrne, being David Byrne, John Goodman here in an early role, being fantastic. Just puts a smile on your face. You can now get the soundtrack album and the Talking Heads album, and it's absolutely fantastic. This Criterion edition does actually come with the soundtrack as well. True Stories, absolutely fantastic. So that's just a selection of films that I would watch in a back-to-back film marathon, loosely based around music. So please let me know what your back-to-back film marathon would be about music. And more importantly, go over to Neil's movie channel, which I'll leave a link to, and subscribe and watch his videos and give lots of thumbs up and click that notification bell, as people say, and give him support because he deserves it, because his channel is continuing to grow, and that's a good thing. It's always good to have more good people in this community, and as I say, Neil's a good person because he bought a couple of John Sayles films. Long may that continue. So thanks very much for watching. This is Sol Giron from Sol Giron Films, saying farewell.